Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. It's time for Spawn Daily. So, second day of the year, we're up to issue number 14. Just a quick reminder, if you just heard about Spawn Daily and you're like, okay, I'm in 2022, I'm ready. I'm going to tune in every day for my daily issue of Spawn. Wait, why the hell did you guys start with issue 13? Well, issue 1 through 12, we did for the 12 days of Spawnmas to count down to Christmas or Spawnmas, whatever you celebrate. And we thought it would be a great little preview of this year of the Spawn 2022, which is also the 30th anniversary. I don't think we mentioned that on the last episode. It's the 30th anniversary of Image Comics, which also makes it the 30th anniversary of Spawn, which sort of factors into why we're doing this, but I think we would have done it anyway. So it's a serendipitous, happy coincidence, and
Yeah.
hopefully it'll help. Hopefully it'll help us get Todd on the Todd Father on the show, because he just posted on social media on New Year's Day about a lot of big Spawn plans he has for the year, and I know a lot of Spawn fans are hoping those plans include kicking off production of the movie, which is going to star Jamie Foxx as Al Simmons, which I kind of like that casting choice.
I do too. I think it's good. I think Jamie Foxx is and he would make a very good Al Simmons. He's capable of channeling enough self-righteous anger and angst, and he's a great actor. And so it's a really good choice.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see who else will be cast. I don't think we've heard too many other rumor. There's another name attached to it, but I don't know who it is at this point. Can't remember. Um, but in some dream casting, which I'm sure we'll do an episode on that at some point. Maybe Halle Berry as Wanda. Um, Oliver Platt, I think, would make a great
Oh,
Sam. I
yeah,
love Oliver
that's
Platt.
well.
So
It's funny because Todd McFarlane he's talked so much about it. He's almost like a broken record. He's so passionate about the movie, and he's he says he's learned so many lessons over the years, and he is ultimately a very good businessman. And this first Spawn movie was okay. It was a guilty pleasure to watch. It still is the original Spawn movie, but he really talks the talk, like he really knows. He wants to do it his way. He wants to be in control of the ship, and with the Spawn movie, he didn't want other people to do it. So I really hope he's successful. I really hope he hits it out of the park because he's put so much time and effort into it, and I'm fingers are crossed that we're going to get a really great Spawn movie.
yeah, so he was executive producer on the first movie, but this one he's not writing it himself, but he does have some input, obviously. But he's going to direct it, so it's really going to be his vision on the screen, much more so than the first Spawn movie was. And I did just look it up. The other big name that's attached to it is playing Twitch, who I mentioned Oliver Platt. I think would make a great Sam.
Yeah.
Twitch is going to be played by Jeremy Renner, who most people would know as Hawkeye from the MCU. So
Oh
between
wow.
Jamie Foxx and Jeremy Renner, I mean, those are some pretty big names.
Yeah, and it's
So
kind of weird. Jeremy Renner is an interesting choice because Twitch in the comics almost looks like a skinny, nerdy type of character, at least in the early issues we're reviewing. So it's Sam and Twitch are like the fat and skinny detectives.
yeah,
So it's very weird. I'd be interested to see who's going to be playing the detective Sam. Sam Burke, I think his full name is.
yeah, yeah, they definitely need to get a big guy.
Yeah,
So yeah, Oliver Platt. I'm sure he doesn't listen to our podcast, but
right.
anyway, we're up to issue 14, everybody, of Spawn, written and drawn by Todd McFarlane. Tom Orzechowski handles the letters. Steve Oliff does the colors. This issue is dedicated to Jim Salicrup, who's a longtime Marvel editor, and I'm pretty sure that was Todd's editor when he was drawing Amazing Spider-Man, and I think also the editor on the eponymous Spider-Man title that spun out of Amazing Spider-Man and basically was Todd's um, first writing credits
Mm.
as a writer. In a book he was also drawing, which Rocky and I've talked about how he got raked over the coals for it not being very good, and it's debatable. I haven't read those early issues in a long time. But what I will say, what I remember most about those first, let's say, 10 issues of Spider-Man, it was a Marvel book that did what every Marvel book in the 90s did in the first 10 issues. You got a guest appearance by Ghost Rider. You got a guest appearance by Wolverine. You got a guest appearance by Punisher. Every time the new Marvel comic in the 90s, you had those because those were the popular characters.
Yeah.
Punisher, Wolverine, and Ghost Rider. They were super popular, so they always showed up. But anyway, let's dive into issue 14. It starts off with the Violator, who we know because of his recklessness, we'll say, his not very well thought out plan in hopes of doing what Malebolgia wanted, which was testing Spawn, testing Al Simmons now that he'd been returned to Earth. Violator came up with this plan. It was a terrible plan, and ultimately it kind of backfired, and crime actually went down, which sort of pissed Malebolgia off because he's wanting crime and evil to increase and people to die and be added to his ranks of his army with his war with Heaven, and the Violators' actions basically did the exact opposite. So, as punishment, Malebolgia has trapped him in his sub 4 foot little clown persona here. And he's referring to himself here as the humble little old Violator as he's recounting this story to these kids who spend a lot of their times on the streets. And the kids are like, dude, you're a clown. We don't really care. We're going to go to the movies. We're not going to listen to you, wasting our time. So what Violator does eventually is he pulls out his wallet and throws money at him. It says, why don't you sit down and listen, you little punks? And the kids, thus bribed, do sit down and wait. So it is sort of interesting, but also of its time. And to Rocky's point about a lot of the villains in Spawn, you can always tell the villains because they have that shit-eating grin, and and the Violator is no exception here. So the story that he recounts is over 800 years ago. There lived an evil wizard, and when he says evil wizard, he's talking about Spawn. He's talking about medieval Spawn. We get a full page splash of medieval Spawn. Fantastic art here from McFarlane. But as we know with the Violator, you take everything he says with a grain of salt, right? Everything's going to be told from his perspective. He's a demon from hell, so
Yep.
lying is second nature to him.
He is an extremely, what we call, an unreliable narrator.
There you go. Exactly. Everything is skewed to make him seem like the hero of the tale, or at least the protagonist, if not the hero. Everything's told from his perspective, and you sort of wonder, like some recent world leaders, we'll say, with an orange tinge to their skin, if they lie so much, they themselves can't even tell reality from lies anymore, right? Like they have lied so much and told the same lies so many times. For them, it has become the truth, and I get that feeling with the Violator here. He's not even aware. Like every time the guy opens his mouth, he spews nothing but lies. So he doesn't even know what the truth is anymore. So as he recounts this story, he talks about how, and again, it's projecting, right? He's talking about medieval Spawn as the bad guy, but projecting his own behavior on medieval Spawn, right? He talks about how this medieval Spawn was an evil wizard and had killed many innocent people, men, women, babies, permanent stains of blood etched across his battle gear, and he kept people in check with the strongest force on Earth. And at that moment, these kids interrupt, saying, "Oh, money, the strongest force on Earth," which, to their point, they just took a bunch of money to sit here and listen to this garbage. So I'm sure it's on their mind. The Violator says, "No, boy, fear. Fear is the strongest force on Earth." So again, he talks about how people fled everywhere he went and citizens cowered. But in the art, and this is an interesting way to look at the story or have the story be told, because we've talked so often in these early issues about how McFarlane doesn't let the art do the talking, and is probably over expositional.
Yeah.
Well, here he's still being over expositional, but he's letting the art actually tell the opposite story of what the words are saying. So he's aware that the art can tell the story without the words, or even in contradiction to the words. So you would think if he's aware of that, he would maybe tone down on the volume of words. But that's neither here nor there. What is interesting is the words that Violator is saying aren't actually true from what we see in the art. Violator says that wherever this medieval spawn went, the citizens fled, and those left behind cowered in the shadows. And what we actually see on the page is these people are cheering medieval spawn because he actually is protecting them. So we know that he's heroic. This is probably where he's from, and then he died and came back as a hellspawn 800 years ago, and he's still loyal to his kingdom. And later in the page, on this particular page, says the people grew to hate him more and more as he stood by doing nothing. But what we actually see happening in the art is that when there was an army that attacked, medieval spawn was there to protect them. He didn't stand by and do nothing. He was the forefront in protecting them. And so the kids say, well, so what happened? Did somebody kill him? Like, what's going on? And Violator says, no, I was assigned. My boss handpicked me to go take him out. Which, now this part's probably true, right? Just like the Violator was chosen to go and test Al Simmons. He was chosen to go and test this medieval version of Spawn. Again, with the lies, the people of the village welcomed me into their homes with open arms. They opened their hearts to me, every last one. Well, they opened their hearts to him because he ripped their chests open and ate their hearts, just like he did with a lot of the mob bosses. So again, interesting way to tell the story. What the Violator's actually saying is sort of the opposite of what's actually true. So once Violator went to the village and terrorized these people and found out information about Spawn, what he actually found out was that the village was sort of protecting Spawn in a way, but again, he felt like he was their champion. And so what Spawn found out was there was an ugly, what Violator found out in his own words was the wizard had his very own ugly, wart-faced, wicked witch mother. And the guys are like, wait, hold on a second. Not only are you 8 years old, but you used to be a lean, mean fighting machine and you fought wizards and witches? And Violator's like, yeah. Like, okay, well then who's this boss of yours? He's like, you've read the Bible? Wait, you're one of God's disciples? And Violator's like, get with the program, recall the other direction, and he points down. And we get a quick interlude here with Sam and Twitch, and they have been cleared of all charges in regards to the body of Billy Kincaid being found murdered in their office. And so they're immediately set off to find Spawn, who they spotted outside of Billy Kincaid's house and suspect was responsible for his death. And they're right in that suspicion, as we know. On the next page, we see that Spawn is actually hanging out in his alley. We do get an update on the amount of power he has left. 7,000 or 7754. I don't know if it's actually 7,754, but 2 sevens. And he's thinking about how he's already kind of squandered some of his power. He's like, how could I be so stupid? I let anger dictate my actions. And he's talking about his battle with Chapel that we talked about last issue. And he's thinking that he gave up the element of surprise. Now Chapel knows he's alive. Will Chapel spill the beans, right? Will he tell everybody that he's still alive? Will they come hunting for him? It's like, well, maybe, maybe not. And even if he does, they might not necessarily believe him because I got to admit, it's pretty unbelievable. But man, did he make a mistake in confronting Chapel and letting him know? But he knows he probably has at least a couple months before anybody's able to track him down, and he'll just sort of cross that bridge when he comes to it. So meanwhile, Sam and Twitch arrive in that area of New York, these alleys where the homeless hang out, where it's been rumored these sightings of this mysterious figure have been. They figure it's a good place to start. They ask all of Spawn's friends. about him, and of course they all lie. Nope, haven't seen anybody. Doesn't ring any bells. You're a nuts, cop. And it just so happens as the Sam and Twitch are talking to his group of friends that Spawn kind of wanders upon them and takes one quick look and was like, "Oh, better wander elsewhere." And Sam and Twitch do catch a glimpse of his cape as he steals away around the corner, and Spawn's friends realize it, and they kind of run interference long enough for Spawn to disappear. But what it has shown is that Sam and Twitch are on the right trail, basically, and they think, "Wow, he got away. This guy must lead a charmed life," and obviously, Al Simmons would not agree, right? His life is, in a lot of ways, a living hell these days. He can't even make himself look like an African American. He knows his best friend married his wife, gave him the child that he couldn't. He's been enlisted by Malebolgia, this demon from hell, to fight against heaven. Like, yeah, he wouldn't exactly consider his life charmed at this moment.
Yeah,
But as
you see
go ahead.
the early signs of McFarlane's use of the cape in a beautiful page with a city skyline with Spawn's cape flapping in the flapping off a building. It looks really gorgeous, and we see more and more of Spawn's cape, and I'm peeking ahead at future issues that cape, what McFarlane does with Spawn's cape, it especially with future artists as well, they expand on that more and more. It gets better and better looking, that cape, as the series progresses in various scenes.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder how much he borrowed this idea with the idea of Venom with a costume that's alive. We know that the costume's a parasite in and of itself. So kind of interesting to think about. And yeah, we'll see a lot more of that in future issues.
Mm.
So then, as the issue continues, we get back into the story of medieval Spawn, and we find out about this evil witch, the wart covered witch, as the Violator described her. But we really see she's quite beautiful. She's a princess. She apparently has had a relationship with medieval Spawn, who she refers to as her prince. And so what the Violator does in order to attract medieval Spawn's attention is he captures the princess, lashes her to a tree, and it doesn't take long before medieval Spawn shows up. And again, all throughout this narrative, as Violators telling the story, he paints himself as the hero and Spawn as this evil wizard, this evil Spawn wizard. But what we actually see in the art is the opposite. Spawn is definitely on the side of right here. So after somewhat of a pitched battle, the Violator opens his mouth and unleashes Hellfire, a maelstrom of acidic flames, full force into the face of his hated enemy, is how he describes it, with the princess looking on, and it strikes Spawn's armor as she screams out no. And we're told by Violator that 10 minutes he unleashed this Hellfire. And he said after that, he stopped and the armor still glowed red hot. And when it finally cooled, you know what I found inside? And the kids are all making fun of him, saying he found Beavis and Butthead, or very tanned wizard, blah, blah, blah. Again, like I mentioned last time, McFarlane using some very specific pop culture references that sort of date the comic a little bit.
Well, he uses the other pop culture references were at the beginning of the comic when he bragged about how heroic he was 800 years ago, and he compared himself that he was even more cooler than Schwarzenegger, Stallone, or Van Damme.
Yeah, yeah.
So those are the other references in the comic.
Yeah. Very true. But what he actually finds before he can even tell the kids, they're like, "We don't really care what you found. It could have been a big pile of crap. We're out of here." So Violator has to bribe them with more money, gives them another $5 for just a few more minutes of their time. And they say, "Okay, Beauty, what did you find?" He said, "Well, I didn't find anything. I had completely disintegrated the poor sucker. Ha, ha, ha." And then we're told that the conclusion will be told in the next issue as a new legend is born. So did this medieval Spawn really get disintegrated by the Violator? Most likely not, because again, this is the Violator giving his version of the story, and it's, again, you take everything that's said with a grain of salt. So there is some great art in this particular issue. there's not a lot of forward momentum as far as the Al Simmons story goes. This isn't the first time we've seen medieval Spawn, right? We saw that in the Neil Gaiman issue 9 with Angela, um, where Neil Gaiman created the concept of medieval, and that does lead into the lawsuit and that kind of stuff, which we may talk about at some point. But I don't want to waste time talking about it here. But this is the first time that McFarlane is expanding upon the idea of, um, a version of Spawn 800 years ago, and really telling us the story of that, and that's sort of the focus of this issue. Although we do get a little bit of narrative for Al Simmons' story, in as much as we know the Violator is still trapped in his diminutive human-looking body. We know that Sam and Twitch are once again on the trail of Spawn, and we know that Spawn is kind of sort of just moping around the back alleys of New York. But beyond that, most of the issue is this story of medieval Spawn, sort of establishing the history and the legacy of Spawn as a character. So, not a whole lot to this issue. Although I think for me, what stands out is, like I was talking about, the fact that the narration that Violator gives us is exactly the opposite of what's actually happening in the art. Which again, I go back to, man, so you know that the art can tell a completely different story or tell a story on its own, Todd. So stop giving us so many words, just telling us what we're seeing in the pictures.
Yeah, I think that aspect of the story, I think, ironically, while McFarlane may not have learned that full lesson, as you've clearly implied, it works very well in the story because it's such a glaring opposite, between the words and what's happening on the page, that it's very obvious. And again, we've talked before how McFarlane just lacks subtlety. You know who the bad guys are, the good guys are, and you know when you have an unreliable narrator, because as you said, he's very good at making clear in the art that the battle between Violator and medieval Spawn clearly did not go, at least in this issue, the Violator's way, as he brags it did to the kids. But I will say this, that, remembering that, reading this for the first time and not remembering, like, honestly, I didn't know how this ended, because I stopped reading Spawn at issue 12. When I got to the end of this issue, I was just waiting for the shoe to drop and waiting for medieval Spawn. I ended this issue wondering, okay, medieval Spawn seems to be holding his own pretty good, but I keep waiting for the shoe to drop, because I'm thinking, well, medieval Spawn isn't alive in the present, but the Violator is. So if the Violator's still around, okay, granted, he works for the devil, maybe he kept getting resurrected, but I was waiting for the shoe to drop, and so it really got me excited for the next issue, going into number 15. So, and I want to say that medieval Spawn I remember medieval Spawn. First of all, he's a cool looking character. Medieval Spawn looks more cool than normal Spawn in my mind. And I remember I remember back in the day, I remember the action figure medieval Spawn. It was more cool looking than regular Spawn. In fact, I'm pretty sure I wanted that action figure, but I had to settle for the regular Spawn. But in any event, I like this. It works good. One thing to mention here is that this was actually funny. The dialogue, the Violator is such a jerk in this issue with the kids. He even talked and I joked about wanting to kill the kids, and I think he was actually kind of serious, because the kids were going to leave.
Yeah.
They were bragging. They were all trading stories about how heroic they were, telling, I don't know, like heroic stories to each other. And they thought the terrible story was the Violator one, and they wanted to leave. And the Violator, as you said, he had to bribe them with money just to keep the kids, just to bloody listen to him. And they didn't want to. So he's this fat, diminutive, fat, under 4 feet guy. He's got no powers, because his powers were taken away from him by Malabrosia. Did I say that right?
Malabulgia, yeah.
Malabulgia.
Yep.
So he's a powerless fat bastard in the back of an alley. He looks terrible. He's bragging to like kids that he's got to pay to listen to his stories, and he's lying in the stories to make himself look good. This is about as low as you can go. And the irony, of course, is that he's 800 years old, and he fought medieval Spawn at one point. And this, as I said, this actually works fairly well. And when Sam and Twitch finally get out, they get their jobs back, and they go and they talk to the street people, talking about because they want to find Spawn, because of course Spawn kills Billy Kincaid and plants Billy Kincaid's office, Billy Kincaid's body literally in their office. And so they want to investigate him. Now, clearly, I think Spawn and them are on the right side, but they probably want to have some words with him. So, it's slow moving forward, but I really like, when you think about this being only the 14th issue, I like how this sort of planted the seeds that this was a major seed planted, that not only was there other Hellspawn killers out there like Angela we saw in issue 9, but that there were other Spawns as well that were pretty cool, but also had Al Simmons' moral code, that Al Simmons wasn't the only one to defy Malabrosia. So I like this issue, and I like what it teased moving forward.
Yeah, again, it's definitely establishing the legacy feel of Spawn, and I sort of knew Medieval Spawn more, maybe not more, but at least as good as Spawn, because I had read Witchblade back in the day, and there was the Witchblade Medieval Spawn crossover. So was aware of him as a character, and felt sort of the same way, that he in a way felt, and even in this story we see, and we'll talk about it more in part 2, that he, in a way, he feels a little more heroic as well. Not only does he look cooler than Al Simmons, he feels a little more righteous, as it were. So anyway, I think that's going to do it for this episode. Again, we appreciate everybody joining us. We'll be doing this all year long, one issue of Spawn every day, at least until we get sick of it, or we succeed, and hopefully we do, because I definitely want to read all these Spawn issues. I find it fascinating. We've talked about the fact we're going to be covering 3 decades of comics in 1 year. So how does the tone change, and what is the aesthetic of comics and pop culture, and as society's tastes change, how did the comic of Spawn adapt? So,
and I just want to throw in one thing, that Jace already has an inside track on a nice Spawn shirt. I don't own a Spawn shirt, neither does Jace. I want to own one if we're going to be doing this all year, so I'm not wearing an Iron Man shirt. My apologies. I should be wearing a Spawn shirt, as should Jace. But
yeah, I'm rocking Dreadstar currently.
Yeah,
Spawn soon.
So I just want to say to the people listening on the podcast, or on the, feel free to let us know, or those watching this on the Comic Boom YouTube channel, feel free to tell us where's the best place to buy a Spawn shirt, and lead me in the right direction, because or Jason and I in the right direction, because we'll definitely do that, because I see a future Spawn shirt in my future.
Yeah, again, 30th anniversary of Spawn. There's going to be tons of Spawn content, so I'm sure there's going to be times where we decide to take a break from doing the reading order, and talk about some other Spawn stuff. Like we kicked this one off, talking about the movie. Hopefully we'll get some news. Hopefully we'll even get some production of the movie, and some pictures
and an interview.
Yeah, and who knows? Who knows? Maybe get Todd on the show at some point. So, anyways, we appreciate the support, everybody. Thanks for joining us as always. Don't forget to head over to the Comic Boom YouTube channel and subscribe. Comic Space Boom ! So you don't miss any of the content Rocky puts out. Ring that notification bell and subscribe, and like this video. Conversely, if you always watch us on YouTube and you haven't subscribed to the audio only, do that as well. Your favorite podcast app or platform, just do a search for the Comic Source there and subscribe. So we really appreciate you guys joining us as always, and we'll talk to you tomorrow with more Spawn.
See you later.